I don't know if I should say anything about it because I may not be right, but I have an idea that your sister has been pushing a few checkers around on the checkerboard.
Annie?
Yeah.
Are you saying you think that she had something to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
How could she have anything to do with it?
Well, Bob, what you don't know is that Penny has talked to me several times about trying to interest Neil into going back into medicine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, I'm sure you didn't. Well, I told Penny that if Neil was going to go back into medicine, that he'd have to do it on his own, without any push or pull from me or any other doctor, and not from her either, as a matter of fact.
But Dr. Testa,
she's talked to him too. You see, Doug feels differently about Neil than I do. Why, I don't know.
and you think that Penny asked him to?
That'd be my hunch, yes.
I'm surprised. And yet I'm not. Must we get a menu? Waiter? I'd like to order. I'm kind of hungry.
Yeah, so am I.
We'll return to As the World Turns in just a moment. I see you have a new family. Youngsters are such a big responsibility. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear about new Friskies puppy food, designed to meet the needs of growing puppies. Friskies is so nourishing. It has 15 added vitamins and minerals. All the protein puppies need to build strong bodies, sturdy bones, and sound teeth. And it has Friskies special beef flavoring. Go ahead, Mother. Help yourself. It's great for you, too. New Friskies puppy food in 2 sizes. Made by Carnation. They love dogs, too. Searching for a great new taste in dog food? Discover new Friskies Magic Sauce Cubes.
Here's a bulletin from CBS News. President Kennedy has been the victim of an assassin's bullet in Dallas, Texas. It is not known as yet whether the president survived the attack against him. The incident was this. The president, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connolly of Texas driving in the president's famed bubble-top car from Dallas Airport to downtown Dallas, where the president was scheduled to make a speech. 3 bullet shots were heard to ring out. The president slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy. Witnesses said they saw blood streaming from his head. Governor Connolly slumped into the bottom of the car. Bullet wounds were seen to be in his chest. The car itself rushed on as Mrs. Kennedy was heard to say, "Oh, no." It took him directly to a nearby hospital, the Parkland Hospital, where the president and Governor Connolly were taken into the emergency room, and witnesses there refused to comment on whether the president was still alive or not. As the bullets were heard to wing out of the assassin's gun, Secret Service men unlimbered their automatic rifles, but the damage, of course, by then had been done. As these details come in, let us read a few to you from the press service wires reaching us only now from Dallas. After these 3 loud bursts of gunshot, Dallas motorcycle officers escorting the president quickly leaped from their bikes and raced up a grassy hill. At the top of the hill, a man and woman appeared huddled on the ground. In the turmoil, it has been impossible so far to determine whether the Secret Service and Dallas police returned the gunfire that struck down Kennedy and Connolly, or whether this couple at the top of the hill, crouched down their inert forms as the police rushed them, were the would-be assassins. Stay tuned for further details from CBS News. We'll bring you details now, more details on the attempted assassination of President Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy was on her knees, we're told, on the floor of the rear seat of the car, her head toward the president, apparently leaning over and trying to converse with him. AP reporter who was with the group said that this man and woman we reported earlier were on a hilltop, were seen scrambling to the upper level of a walkway overlooking an underpass at which the car was approaching. Lawrence O'Brien, the presidential aide, says he has no information on whether the president is still alive. Mrs. Kennedy was weeping, trying to hold up her husband's head when the reporters reached the car as it dashed toward the hospital. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was in the car behind the president. There was no immediate sign that he was hurt. Repeating that, no indication Vice President Johnson was hurt. In fact, there was no evidence at all at what might have happened to Johnson, since only the president's car and its Secret Service follow-up car went on to the hospital. Let us recount this incident again. There has been an assassination attempt against the life of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. The president, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connolly of Texas, en route from the Dallas airport to a speech the president was scheduled to make at noon in Dallas, were in the president's famed bubble-top car, driving through cheering crowds in the streets of Dallas when 3 shots rang out. The president slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy, apparently a bullet wound in his head. Governor Connolly slumped to the floor of the car. Bullet wounds were seen in his chest. Mrs. Kennedy screamed out, "Oh no!" The car stopped momentarily. Secret Service men unloaded their rifles and started into the crowd. 2 persons, a man and a woman, were seen crouched with a crowd around them on a hilltop overlooking the road. Whether they were concerned in the shooting or not, we do not know yet. Secret Service men rushed to that scene and were waiting a report on that. Vice President Johnson was in the car immediately following President Kennedy and Governor Connolly. He was not hurt as far as we are able to determine. The president and Governor Connolly were rushed to a nearby hospital, Parkland Hospital, where they were taken into the emergency room, and we have no information yet as to how serious the injuries were. However, aides very close to President Kennedy had no comment when they were asked by reporters the seriousness of the president's injuries. Late information just in. Acting White House Secretary Malcolm Kilduff was asked whether the president was dead, and he said, "I have no word now." The president had landed just a short time before, as we said, at Dallas Love Field. He was driving to the Trade Mart in Dallas to deliver this luncheon speech, which was to be sponsored by 3 Dallas organizations. The largest turnout of the current Texas tour was on the streets to greet Kennedy. He was being greeted lavishly by the crowd in a very warm Texas welcome when the bullet fired out of the crowd. Stay tuned. We'll bring you the details just as quickly as they come in. It might be recalled that Dallas has been a hotbed of criticism of President Kennedy and his administration by outspoken rightist groups. Only 2 weeks ago, Ambassador Adlai Stevenson of the United Nations was in an incident in Dallas when he was besieged by pickets, far right-wing pickets, outside of a speech he made there, and he was struck in the head by a picket sign by an outraged conservative who felt we should not be in the United Nations. Even today, through Dallas, there were cars touring the streets with signs, U.S. or UN. A little late information. Rear Admiral George Berkeley, the United States Navy, the White House physician, rushed into that Parkland Hospital in Dallas. He headed for the emergency room where the president and Governor Connolly were taken. Still awaiting word as to the condition of the president from that emergency room. Governor Connolly of Texas is the young governor who managed the campaigns of Lyndon Johnson over the last several senatorial and vice presidential campaigns of Johnson's. He is a leader of what is considered the more conservative wing of the Democratic Party in Texas. Part of the reason for President Kennedy's being in Texas was said was to try to patch up differences between the conservative and liberal wings of the Democratic Party, which it was believed endangered the chances of the administration taking Texas in the 1964 election. Let's recount again that President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas lie in the emergency room at Parkland Hospital in Dallas as an anxious world waits to learn how serious are the injuries that they suffered from an assassin's bullets. President Kennedy has been injured apparently in the head, Governor Connally of Texas in the chest. 3 bullet shots were heard to ring out as the president's car drove through the crowded streets of Dallas on the outskirts from the airport toward downtown. Further details now as we learn that the motorcade was so strung out as a result of the speedy Secret Service departure from the scene of the shooting that members of the Kennedy staff were from 15 minutes to a half hour behind in reaching the hospital. It was impossible, they tell us now, under the tension at the hospital, to assemble any clear-cut story of the incident because the burst of gunfire, of course, took only seconds, and from there on out, confusion. Some of the Secret Service agents thought the gunfire, however, was from an automatic weapon fired to the right rear of the chief executive's car, possibly from a grassy knoll, and that's that knoll to which motorcycle policemen were seen racing and where the huddled figures of a man and a woman were seen on the ground with a crowd surrounding them, which suggests, of course, that perhaps this is where the shots came from. This we do not know as yet positively. A late bulletin. Representative Albert Thomas, the Democrat from Houston, Texas, says that he has been informed that President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas are still alive, or at least were still alive at the last word he had a few moments ago from Parkland Hospital. This is the first word we have had definitely from the emergency room, giving some hope that they survived this assassination attempt. The last assassination attempt against a president of the United States was that attack against President Truman when he was living at Blair House in Washington, and Puerto Rican nationalists charged the Blair House steps, attempted to enter Blair House. If this reporter's memory is correct, about 1951 that incident took place. They were cut down by Secret Service agents, but a Secret Service man died thwarting that attempt to enter Blair House. The president, Truman at the time, was only barely aware of what was going on. He, as a matter of fact, watched the incident from the upstairs windows after the shooting took place on Pennsylvania Avenue at Blair House. This incident recalls the incident at which Franklin Delano Roosevelt was an intended victim, and where Mayor Chermak of Chicago died in an assassination attempt in Florida. And President Roosevelt was on a tour, of course, many years ago. Recounting the episode again for you, President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas were shot as they were driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas. Assassins unknown as yet, their condition unknown. It is believed that President Kennedy was hit in the head, Governor Connally in the chest. We'll be back in 10 seconds to allow all our stations to identify themselves and to join the network. our newsroom in